Pastor Samuel Orr, the Rock United Ministries, graduated from East Nashville High School, been pastoring for 6.5 years, ministering for a little over 9 years. And the reason why I'm here today is Pastor KWalker and I, along with Shanice and a few other organizations, we work together for us trying to reduce violence. We can't stop it, but we sure try to reduce it, and one way is by uniting together. And my church is located 2134 15th Avenue North, Nashville, Tennessee.
Pastor Walker, you know, he's indicated that the topic that we are really dealing with today, and that is the increase in gun violence within our community, and what strategies we might be able to develop in order to decrease this gun violence. As a matter of fact, quite recently, I think we heard that there have been more than 10 shootings over the last 3 or 4 days in this city. And so why don't you make some statements in reference to how you perceive the kind of violence that we're faced with and what might be done, and then we'll go to Ms. Greves and then on to Pastor Orr again. Why don't you start off?
Well, you know, Dr. Haynes, there's no doubt that there is an issue with gun violence, you know, and I think it's a deeply rooted issue because you got to factor in there's a lot of anger, there's a lack of morality, there's a lack of teaching, there's a lack of understanding, there's a lack of the ability to resolve conflicts without violence. So this thing is really escalating, and then you got to also look at the fact that there are more guns that are being placed into our society as well, you know, to help perpetuate this thing dealing with gun violence. So you take and to sit here and basically deny that it's the major part when we talk about gun violence in the United States of America. We're actually talking about gun violence amongst the African American community, because that's where you get a lot of the gun violence, you know. Our people are murdering one another on a daily basis. And we have to get a solution. We have to come to some point where we get our hands on this and develop some strategies. Therefore, you got different programs that are out here that are designed to do something about this situation that pretty much is a dilemma right now. You know, gun violence is at epidemic proportions, and I think it takes a full-out effort, not only by just one set of individuals, one agency, one group, but we have to come together as a collaboration to make some things actually happen, to make our impact felt within our society, because we got to serve our people. And when it comes to the church, you know, I'll say this, when it comes to the church has really got to step up and take an active role in this situation. I'm not one of those individuals. I'm one that's very quick to say that, you know, we talk about the church and in this age of multicultural, multiracial churches and stuff like that, we cannot neglect we cannot fail to neglect to realize that the church has to have, if there's a big issue with gun violence in the black community, the black church needs to have a black agenda. And that's what we're finding that's not really prevalent in our churches, in the black church in America, is a black agenda, because of the fear of seeming a prejudice, fear of seeming racist, I mean, whatever that fear is. But, you know, we have, if it's our problem, then we need to have an agenda to address and to deal with and to solve our problem. Otherwise, that problem will always be our problem. It will never be solved.
Very good. Now, Ms. Greves, you're trying to do something within the framework of what he's talking about. How are you trying to address some of the issues that we're dealing with here, Ms. Greves?
Okay. I have a boys program called Gents. And Gents is ran by my brother, who is an ex-gang member and who has been a part of the violence. And so just talking to him and understanding what his mindset was when he was a part of the gangs and when he was out here doing what he was doing. He gives me a lot of insight to understand how to reach these boys and how to come to them. We cannot be scared of them. We have to come to them and talk to them, love on them, see what's really going on. And just to piggyback on what Pastor Walker was saying, there's too many churches in these areas where all this violence is going on. There's too many people out here. We have to be forceful and go out here and take our communities back. We cannot be scared of, we just can't be scared. We have to get out here and really do something and make something happen.
Pastor, what do you think about the escalating violence among perhaps many of your members of your church and congregations, and all of our churches and congregations. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Some of my members have been ex-gang members or present gang members because of the area that we're in. One of the things that I praise Pastor Walker for what he just said was education. Our people perish from lack of knowledge. And one of the things is if we believe that guns grow in grounds, then something's wrong. They don't grow in grounds. They're handed to us. They're handed to us. And one thing that she failed to mention is her brother is an ex-gang member, but he's also a Christian believer now, working for the Lord. And that's how we have to show these young people as well as old people, because my uncle was killed last year and it wasn't by a gang member. So we have to show them other ways. And as she said, don't be afraid to go out and walk amongst our neighborhoods and get the churches to come together as well as different organizations. This is what you're doing today, having us be able to speak out and let them know that we're not afraid. If somebody do a shooting over here, we're going to go pray on that land and cast out those demons and let those demons know that we're not afraid to do God's work.
And so, Pastor Walker, you think that the efforts that we're making here is directed in reference to some of the things that we have to do? Is that what we're saying?
Oh, absolutely, Dr. Haynes. We got to have, first of all, we got to have a healthy dialogue about what's really going on and deal with the issues the way they are, real, and not, just not skirt over them and look at it as and pretend like it doesn't happen. We wait for events to go down, and then all of a sudden we want to mass together and we want to march when we should be massing together and marching when one young black man get killed and there's no counseling for the young children around that witnessed it.
Okay, very good. And of course, what we'll do now is to take our second commercial break, and then we'll come back for this third segment, and we'll have 10 minutes to further elaborate and explain some of the things that we're talking about. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Pastor Walker, Pastor SOrr, and SGreves2 about the increase in gun violence and some of the strategies that we might be able to use in order to deal with some of the problems that we have. Ms. SGreves2, I think that we should start with you doing this last segment to give you an opportunity not only to talk about your program, but at the same time to perhaps give us some additional information in terms of how you see gun violence in this city and wherever.
Again, Gents is a program that we do, just reaching out to the boys in the community. When it comes to gun violence, it breaks my heart. It's ridiculous, I have a few boys of my own, boys that I've been interactive with that have been lost, lives have been lost through the gun violence, so it hurts me. So I'm trying to do any and everything that I can. I'm going into the schools, in the neighborhoods, and the housing projects, everywhere I can be to reach out and number one, show love to them. I try my best just to show love. If I can't do nothing else, it's to show you something, because we don't know what they're dealing with at home. It's a root to it, and if we can get to the root of what these boys are dealing with, we could help a whole lot.
Pastor SOrr, looking at your situation, what are some of the things that you think that people outside of us might be able to do in terms of helping to decrease it? And I say that primarily because so many people have talked about the lack of opportunities, the lack of jobs, and et cetera. Have you, do you see that as a real issue in terms of this youth violence that we're facing?
Yes, sir. God must have told you that, because that's one of the things that we have to work on as a unit, is to provide jobs. If one person hear about a job, spread that out to everybody. Give them school opportunities. I love when Pastor Walker said education, because our people are perishing. I repeat that, from lack of knowledge. They can't get a home because they have a felony. You know, doors are being shut that way. It's time to open up doors for second chances. They say we get second chances, and you're looking at an ex-convict. You know, they say we get second chances, but once you get labeled, then how can you get that door open for you to get a job? Or they give you, they say in the prison system, they give you a college degree, but you can't use that degree on the streets, you know, or give you training, but you can't get a job with that training. It's time out for that. You know, it's time to if you hear about a job, we post that job. If you hear about, and if we're going to do events, let's do events with resources, you know, health resources, job resources, education resources. Don't just do it just to put on a show, because God is tired of talk. Talk is cheap to him. You really want to impress him, and by coming together, education, jobs, homelessness, all of those opportunities need to be reopened.
So in other words, it's just a whole series of things that help to contribute to the attitudes that folks have toward one another, and that if some of these individuals are able to get jobs, they might have a different attitude in terms of how they deal with other individuals and et cetera. Is that what we're saying?
Well, that's true. That's true. Jobs are necessary and are needed. At the same time, up front, prior to that, we need some educational training to prepare people to go into a job. Because if I'm running a company, you show up on my job site, man, if you come in, you want a job, but you don't want to work the job, you just want to check, then that's not going to work. You're not going to have the job long anyway. So there's got to be some training going in up front. But when you talk about strategies to combat this gun violence, when you look at it the way the system looks at it, you know, when I'm talking about the system, I'm talking about this governmental system that we live in, that we function in. They're looking at from the school to prison pipeline, they got this thing going, and they're looking at our third and fourth graders, and they're determining how many prisons they're going to build based on that. Then children are being sold to the government through an ADHD diagnosis, when they just, some in many cases high energy children, but because the government would attach a check to that diagnosis, then you got many single mothers who are not realizing, but they're selling their children to the school to prison pipeline, because then you take an intelligent child, you put him in a special education class, he's being slowly taught, and then he's irritated, he becomes angry, he becomes violent, because he's at a level, you're trying to teach him on a level that he's above, just because he's been diagnosed with something that he don't have, as just for the sole purpose of getting him into that school to prison pipeline. And black males are under attack in that area. So we got to reach out and get the 2-year-olds, the 3-year-olds, and bring them in. My church right now, you know, we're in the process of researching and developing programs that will minister to the needs of single women and their children, and then to be able to go in and teach them, teach the parent, teach the child, and then at the same time reach on the other end of the other side of this thing and grab a hold to the man, because to restore the man means to restore the family. But God has shown me that the fastest route is through the woman and the child, because you get to the child quicker, but at the same time you restore the man so he can get in his rightful position and bring that covering over that family and guide that family down this pathway called life in the right way. But Dr. Haney, if we don't get proactive in doing something, George Zimmerman shoots Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman is found not guilty, and they're marching everywhere all over the United States in protest of this. 2 weeks from now, nobody remembers George Zimmerman, nobody remembers Trayvon Martin, just like nobody remembers now Troy Davis. You know what I'm saying? But we've marched and we've marched and we've marched, you know, but what good is it if we're not taking it to where it needs to be. If we're not legislating, if we're not voting, if we're not actively trying to involve ourselves in changing some of these low down dirty laws that's on the books today, then what are we really doing? So, we got to have some people that's going to step up boldly, man. Our children are under attack. And I, for one, I'm not going to sit back and just allow it to happen when I have the ability, the knowledge, and the wisdom, and the know-how, and the courage to step forward and do something. So I'm trying to research. I'm trying to partner with various organizations, various ministries, people who are not afraid. If people who are scared, I don't need to deal with them because I'm not afraid. You know what I'm saying? Worst thing that happen to an individual that want to save our children's life, you can lose your life in the process, but so what? Look how many people have lost our lives so that some of us now are enjoying life, Dr. Haney. So this thing is serious, man. And people sit around and want to talk about it and talk about it and talk about the problem, but then nobody wants to solve the problem. And then everybody wants to get mad when what's normal happens. See, it's normal for a George Zimmerman to shoot a Trayvon Martin. That's
happens
normal.
all the
That's
time.
normal in America, But then when it happens, we look at it like it's something that's abnormal. Then we want to mass up. Then we want to march, hold up signs, and we shall overcome. Overcome what? You know what I'm saying, man?
Very good. I'm very good. That's some good stuff. Ms. Greaves, now, I see you agree with some of those statements. Now, how do you see the young people that you're working with? I mean, what are you actively doing in order to turn them around?
We are, well, what we're doing right now, they meet once a month, and it's just some interactive activities going on with the boys. And then, actually, my brother, he's doing a Bible study in Dodge City, where he's getting the gang members together, and he's getting the young boys out there just hanging out in the streets and bringing them together and having a Bible study and just talking to them. He tell them, you want to bring your, what he say, your Glocks or whatever. He's want them to be themselves because a lot of them don't want to go into the church. So he's bringing who he is now to them because that's where he was at. And I agree with everything Pastor Walker said because we have to start with those little kids.
Very good. And so, Pastor Orr, let's have you to close us out over this last minute that we have here with some statements in reference to how you feel that we ought to move from here.
Amen. I also agree with Pastor Walker because I saw his zeal, his passion. We have to stop being afraid to step out on faith. A lot of people stayed in the boat when they need to step out on faith and trust God to lead us to our people. And if they bring their guns, as she said a few minutes ago, we have to teach them to lay those guns down and pray over our people. We don't pray. We pray of the righteous prevaileth much. We need to learn to pray with a sincere heart and trust God to do his will.
Very good. And of course, let me, over the last few seconds that we have here, thank the three of you for coming by and giving us that excellent information with passion, and information with knowledge, because I think that all of you have been in the ranks for a long time, and you've seen the issues that we all have to face, and we felt that by simply bringing the three of you together, and as well as Mr. Watts, who was also here with us, by bringing all of you together and getting some statements in reference to where do we go from here, I think that we might be able to move. And of course, let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning. Thank you and welcome to the show today. The topic this morning is Islam in the United States at the 21st century. And we have to talk about Islam in the United States at the 21st century, Dr. A. Al-Hadid. Dr. Al-Hadid is no stranger to this show. As a matter of fact, I think that he's given us excellent shows over the last 20 or 25 years. And of course, Dr. Al-Hadid, let me welcome you to the show. And I don't think that we exaggerate when we say that we really don't have to introduce you to our audience, because you've been with us for a long time and you've given us excellent shows. And I think that the topic that we're going to talk about this morning is a topic that's suited to you, because you've dealt with this topic on this show on a number of occasions, as well as having other guests with you. Let's start off, Dr. Al-Hadid, by telling the audience, those who might not know you, some information about your background, some statements about your background, your education, and some of the things that really brought you to us this morning. And then we'll get into the topic of Islam in the United States at the 21st century.
Okay. Well, I want to take a different approach to my resume this time. I want to look at my religious biography, because that's the topic that we're going to talk about. I was born in apartheid Alabama, more succinctly in Montgomery, Alabama, during the times of the civil rights movement. And I grew up in a Baptist church in Montgomery. Like Christ, I was baptized at age 12 and was a Sunday school teacher during that experience. Once I graduated from high school, George Washington Carver High School, then I went to Alabama State University. While at Alabama State University, you know what happens when you go to college, you stop going to church. You know, that's your church attendance starts to decline, you know. And so while my church attendance was declining, I started reading some existentialism, you know, like John Paul Sartre and Albert Camus and that type of thing. So, you know, I flirted with being, you might say, an agnostic at one. Not quite an atheist, but an agnostic, you know. And so then when I finished Alabama State, I went to University of California, Santa Barbara, for graduate school there. And while there, it just so happened that most of my close friends were Muslims from different parts of the world and different persuasions. And then I read the autobiography of Malcolm X probably about 7 times. And from that point, I just came to the conclusion that, you know, I wanted to give Islam a try, you know, I wanted to become a Muslim. So I got an opportunity to study a study abroad program, University of Nairobi in Nairobi, Kenya. After having been there for maybe about a week or so, I went to the mosque and I told the imam, who's the preacher, that I wanted to be a Muslim. And so I officially converted there, and probably shortly after that, maybe about 6 months after that, I got a chance to make the pilgrimage to Mecca. And so that way I was able to see the big picture. I guess I was about 24 years old when that happened. And then I came back to the States, I got my doctor's degree, and landed a job at Tennessee State, and initially in the sociology department. And then, of course, I established the Africana Studies department some years later in 1994. And I built that department over a period of about 15 years. And then I retired from the university maybe about 5 years ago. And so that's pretty much, you know, my story. Dr. Baldwin and I co-authored a book entitled Between the Cross and Christian and Muslim Perspectives on Malcolm and Martin, where we both try to work at our respective religious biographies as well as the religious biographies of Malcolm and Martin.
Very good. And so you've been involved in what we're going to talk about today for a long time.
Yes.
And you've had some real thoughts in reference to it. And you come from a background that people would not ordinarily associate with you being involved in the religion that you're involved in. Is that essentially what you're saying in terms of your religious background, and et cetera? Nobody would have thought that a young man a black man from Birmingham, from Alabama, would be eventually become one of the most important scholars in a real sense dealing with Islam in the United States, as you are. And what we'll do, Dr. Al-Hadid, as we make preparations for our first commercial break, break. We'll come back and we'll give you an opportunity to use the knowledge that you have to inform our people in reference to Islam in the United States at the 21st century. We've had you on, as we indicated earlier, dealing with this topic, but I think that so much has happened over the last few years in reference to Islam, and some things are going on in Egypt today that you can probably enlighten us on in reference to it. And so when we come back for the second segment, I want you to use that experience and some of the current things that are going on in the world today dealing with Islam, and to bring our audience up to date as to how that is viewed at the 21st century. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you, and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. Al Hadid, who has given us some information in reference to his background and some of the things that have played very, very significant parts in his earlier career dealing with Islam. And of course, Dr. Al Hadid, let's pick up where we left off the last time, because I think that what we're trying to do is to look at Islam in the 21st century in the United States. And so from your perspective, let's talk about that.
Yes, well, first thing I'd like to say Ramadan Mubarak to all of the Muslims around the world that are currently fasting. In Nashville, this is our 8th day of fasting. You know, Islam is probably one of the most misunderstood religions in America, and might be one of the most misunderstood religions on the planet, especially in a post 9/11 world. And and before we could really get our balance back, you know, you had this thing that happened at the Boston Marathon, you know, which has exacerbated, the whole situation. So let me give your viewing audience an idea of what Islam is, because so many people have their definition of what it is and their perspective on it. Well, Islam is a very simple and natural religion. That's first of all. It comes out of the Abrahamic traditions, which means that it is a sister religion to Judaism and Christianity. Now, Judaism and Christianity all go back to Abraham, but through his first wife, Sarah, that's created the Jewish nation of the Israelites. Okay, Abraham took a second wife by the name of Hagar, who was an Egyptian, and out of that marriage came a son by the name of Ishmael. In the Bible, the people referred to as the Ishmaelites. And the Ishmaelites are the Arabs of the Arabian desert. So out of that line came our prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. So you have these three religions all coming from a shared patriarch, Abraham. Now, what does Islam actually stand for? If you go to the Ten Commandments, the first commandment of the Ten Commandments is, "Thou shalt have no other God before me." Well, that's the first article of faith in Islam. We just, in Arabic, in the Islamic way of thinking, we just simply say that I bear witness there is no God but Allah. It's the same thing that the Jewish people say when they say that thou shalt have no other God before me. So there's this idea that both religions, Judaism and Christianity, are diametrically opposed to anyone associating partners or associates with God, that God is one. And then in an extension of that, we say that our prophet Muhammad is the last and final messenger. And what are we saying here? We're simply saying that Prophet Muhammad is a continuation of the prophetic chain that in our theology goes all the way back to Noah, who is Noah, coming down to Moses, coming down to Jesus, going through all of the prophets. And so we're saying that all of the prophets taught total submission to the will of God. What does Islam mean? That's exactly what it means. Islam means that you submit your finite will to the infinite will of your Creator, of God, right? And that means total submission to the will of God. So the first article facing Islam is to bear witness that there's no God except Allah, and that Muhammad is his last and final messenger. Now, like all other religions, we have prayer. We pray 5 times a day, and our prayer is regulated by the positions of the sun. The first prayer is at first light, which is dawn. We call it in Arabic the Fajr prayer. And then when the sun goes all the way up to its highest point and starts to decline, we have a second prayer called the Dhuhr prayer, which is the noon prayer. And then maybe about 2 hours after that, we have the afternoon prayer called the Asr prayer. And then at sunset, we have our 4th prayer, which is the Maghrib prayer. And then about 2 hours after sunset, we have the 5th prayer, which is the Isha prayer. And the cycle starts all over again. And sometimes, in what we call the second midnight, you can pray, after midnight. Our third pillar of faith is charity. Now, all religions that I know of, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Hindu, they have some form of charity. And our charity, we pay 2.5% of our income back to society. Muhammad Ali once had a famous quote. He said, charity is the rent that you pay for your place on earth. So we always have to be empathetic and sympathetic with the poor. We want to give back. The 4th pillar is what we are doing now. It's the month of Ramadan, which is the 9th month of the Islamic calendar. And during this period of fasting, first of all, in order to start the fasting, we have to sight the new moon visually. And once we see that new moon, then we start fasting. You can't eat, drink, or engage in lawful conjugal relationships with your spouse until the sun sets. So you're fasting without drinking anything, without eating anything, from dawn to sunset. Now, after the sun sets, you are free to eat or drink what you would normally eat or drink, and to actually go back to your normal life. Then the cycle starts over. And this goes on for 1 month. And during this month, we are strongly encouraged to recite a part of the Quran. The Holy Quran is divided into 30 parts, and each day we are to recite 1/30th of the Quran. This part is called a juz, so we'll recite that. And right now we are at the 11th part of the Quran. The Quran is the book that was revealed to Prophet Muhammad, as the Torah was revealed to Moses, as the New Testament was revealed to Jesus. And so that's our holy book. So we have to believe in all of the books that came before us. We have to believe in all of the prophets that came before us. And the 5th pillar of Islam is the pilgrimage to Mecca. And I think a lot of our viewing audience might know about the narrative that Malcolm X gave when he went to Mecca and he saw all of these people from different cultures, different nationalities, different colors, different languages, all coming together in a common humanity. And I'm often reminded of something that Dr. Martin Luther King said, which is so powerful. He said that we all tied together in a single garment of destiny, in an inescapable network of mutuality. What affects one directly affects all indirectly. So we are all one human family. And we have to learn as a human family how to get along, how to form relationships with each other, how to do trade and commerce, fair and reasonable trade and commerce with each other, and how to get along, because we're just one planet. We're one blood. We come from the same genetic pool. We come from the same DNA. We're human beings. And so we have to learn to love each other and respect each other as human beings.
And of course, Dr. Ellerty, let us take this second commercial break, and then we'll come back and we'll pick up at that point, and we'll get into some other aspects of the religion in the 21st century. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you and welcome to this final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. Al-Hadid, who has given us some information in reference to Islam in the United States at the 21st century, and he has given us an excellent review in terms of religions in the United States and especially religions in the world. And Dr. Al-Hadid, let's pick up during this final segment and to talk about the impact that Islam has had upon the United States during the 21st century, or as the 21st century emerges.
Well, let's look at it from a global standpoint. To start off demographically, there are approximately 1.5 billion Muslims on the earth. Most Muslims external to the United States are concentrated on two continents, Asia and Africa. Inside of the United States, the estimates vary, but I think the most accurate estimate is probably that there are anywhere between 7 and 10 million Muslims inside of the United States. Of those 7 to 10 million Muslims, approximately 50% are African Americans. So we would say maybe about 5 million African Americans, Muslims, and then 5 million Muslims who are of immigrant descent. Some immigrants, however, are born in the United States, but I'm talking about descent in terms of where their parents came from, you know. And so you could classify the African American Muslim as indigenous Muslims to that extent, and then the other group would be the immigrant Muslims, even though, as I said earlier, some of the immigrants are born here, so that would also make them indigenous, but I'm talking more from a historical level, because you can trace the presence of African American Muslims in the United States all the way back to slavery, and then you can trace the presence of African Muslims in this part of the world before Columbus. You know, you had people, Mansa Musa, for example, from the Mali Empire, sent a group of people out on the ship. He sent maybe about 200 ships out to explore this area before Columbus. And it was the actual travel documents of these people that went out before Columbus that Columbus actually used to plot his course and come in this part of the world. And as a matter of fact, some of his navigators on his various ships were Muslims who had already traveled to this part of the world. So it wasn't that Columbus discovered the New World. It had already been discovered. And he was the one that got discovered once he came over here, you see, because Muslims were already over here. When Columbus got here, there were mosques in Cuba. There were mosques in Brazil. And so what happened, Columbus' explorations into this part of the world was nothing more, if you will, than an extension of the Spanish Inquisitions. All right, so in other words, he was coming to this part of the world to ferret out the Moors that he had been dealing with for the Spanish had been dealing with the Moors in Spain for 700 years. You know, Islam came out of North Africa and went into Spain, where it was in Spain for 700 years. And it started, I mean, if you want to look at it, you can say that the presence of the Moors in Spain was a catalyst that sparked the European Renaissance that brought them out of the Dark Ages, you see. So, and then we could also say, then, you know, you had the slave trade that started, and the slave trade was nothing more than a continuation of the Crusades and the Spanish Inquisitions. So that getting back inside of the United States, you know, we've always had Muslims coming up from slavery. You've had people like Omar Said, you've had people such as Ibrahim SOrr. These people, when they came over, many of them had memorized the entire Quran. They could speak and write Arabic, as well as their own languages, whether that was Hausa or Mandinka or Wolof. They were highly educated people. They were scholars, you know, and translators in their own world. Some of them were legal scholars. They had studied what we call the Sharia, which is Islamic law. And so they came out well established. They were merchants. They were soldiers. So when they came to America, they were just not manual labor. These were people who were skilled craftsmen and intellectuals and scholars, and they could read and write, which is what most of the Europeans over here could not do. Most of the people who were plantation overseers and why they came out of Europe, and the illiteracy was very high. See, in Europe during the period when the Muslims were at the highest point, only 5% of the people in Europe could read and write. And most of the people in Europe that could read and write were directly connected with the Vatican or some church establishment because they needed to be able to do the Latin and the Greek and so forth. So the literate people were the royal family, and the literate people were the people were connected with the, the Catholic Church and the Church of England, etc. But the masses of the people could not read and write. So when these Muslims are coming over here, they can read and write in Arabic, they can read and write in Hausa, they can read and write in Fulani. They got to do something about these people. And so that's what the Middle Passage was really all about, stripping these people of their knowledge of self and kind, their knowledge of their culture, and their civilization. So that when we look at Islam in the 21st century, we have to look at Islam against that backdrop. So let's go to the year 1965, which I think for Islam was a very pivotal year, because that was a period where the immigration laws changed and the Americans allowed more people from the Muslim world to come to the United States, from Turkey, from Syria, from Iraq, from Lebanon and other places like that. Now what happened, as you know, the Ottoman Empire collapsed after World War I, because it actually was an empire that started in the 7th century in Arabia and developed all the way up to World War I. So you had one Islamic empire, if you can imagine, from the 7th century all the way up to World War I. And the reason that the Ottoman Turkish Empire collapsed is because they got on the side with Germany.
The wrong side in the war.
They were on the wrong side of the war. They sided with Germany rather than getting with England. Had they gotten with England, then the empire would not have collapsed. So it's because of the fact that the Moors and the Ottomans were so involved on the other side that they said, well, we can't let these people come, inside of the United States. So they changed the law. Just before 1965, as we said it earlier, Malcolm X made the pilgrimage to Mecca in April of 1964. And so that brought the American public into a better knowledge of true and proper Islam. We're talking about mainstream Islam. Some people might call it Orthodox Islam or Sunni Islam, but proper Islam, the Islam that the Prophet Muhammad brought, and the Islam that I described earlier when I was talking about the 5 pillars, bearing witness there's no God but Allah, Muhammad is the messenger, prayers 5 times a day, the charity, fasting during the month of Ramadan, which we're doing now, and also the pilgrimage to Mecca. That is the foundation of the religion. Now, when we look at Islam in post 9/11 world, that's where the problems start coming in. Right here in our own Middle Tennessee, we have people in Murfreesboro who are talking about anti-Sharia law. Well, what does anti-Sharia law mean? It means that you don't have the right to practice your religion. I mean, everything about what we do as Muslims, the prayer, the charity, the washing up for prayer, everything that we do, the food that all that has to do with Sharia.
And
you
if
see?
you don't have
if you
Sharia
can't practice Sharia law, you can't practice Islam. Okay? Now, we know that in the 1970s, Muhammad Ali said he was a conscientious objector, that he was not going to Vietnam, and they were trying to say Islam was a cult and it wasn't a religion. His case went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and the United States Supreme Court declared that in fact Islam is a legitimate religion, and Muhammad Ali has every right to be a conscientious objector.
Very good. And of course, Dr. Al-Adid, we're going to have to stop at that point, but
Okay.
I think that the information that you've given us has really given us some idea in terms of Islam in the United States at the 21st century, and it is still a powerful religion,
Yes.
still growing. And of course, let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.